Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Dikas, and welcome to the ANONYMOUS.BUDDHA channel here on YouTube. My goal with this channel is to make a case, make an argument, lay out the possibility, shall we say, that this thing called the 12 Steps is none other than a handbook to enlightenment. I say this because step 12 very clearly says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we carry this message. And that spiritual awakening that they talk about in the 12th step, in my humble opinion, could also be called enlightenment. So, in this video, what I'd like to do is explore the phrase, the quote of a man named Nisargadatta. This guy Nisargadatta wrote this amazing book called I Am That. Let me see if you can see. There we go. It's tough to, sorry, light's kind of bright. As you can see, this book has been duct taped back together, as is my original big book. Here's all just friggin' duct tape. I like duct taping things back together rather than throwing them out and getting new ones. So this guy Nisargadatta died in the 70s, and he's from India. Great sage, one of the more awake, enlightened masters of our times. He had a quote: "God is not a relationship to know, it is a relationship to be." God is not a relationship to know. If some of you know me well, you know that when I talk about myself, my knowledge base, this thing I refer to as me, that looks out into the world around me and reflects everything back to itself, I talk about that self as being a 10 gigabyte thumb drive. You know, the kind of like little thumb drives you stick into the side of your computer that you can transfer information from here to there. Well, I think of myself as a 10 gigabyte. Back in the early days, you know, now they have terabyte hard thumb drives. It's crazy. But back in the day, one of the larger sizes you could get at that very time was 10 gigabytes, which is basically the size of 2 DVDs. What I'm trying to say with that analogy is that's a very limited amount of space. That's a very limited amount of information, space to store information. So when I think about this thing called a self that resides somewhere in this general location, I talk about it in the sense of it's just a very limited amount of knowing and understanding, right? I mean, through the course of my life, I have learned and I have seen and I've witnessed and I've, you know, like there's all this information that's come in. I've got 50 years worth of information. So my 10 gigabytes, let's say that's 100 years worth of information. My 10 gigabytes is halfway full at this time. And yet, I think that I know the answer to things, and I know what the problem is, and I know what would be right for you, and I know what's right for me. Don't you know? You know, it's like I get this false sense, this false illusory sense of sort of the all-knowing I, when in actuality, if I just take my 10 gigabytes and say, I don't know, compare it to my little Apple laptop that's got a terabyte, that 10 gigabytes not anything compared to my terabyte laptop. Now, put that towards like the Watson, IBM Watson that's in the cloud, which is, I don't know, a trillion, billion, bazillion, gazillion terabytes, right? I mean, the computing power is so much bigger than my 10 gigabytes. So what I'm trying to say here is this thing is limited. This thing, my knowingness, is limited just to what I know. If you imagine like everybody else, say in your neighborhood, as being a 10 gigabyte hard drive. Well, just in your neighborhood alone, I don't know how big your neighborhood is, but in my neighborhood, just in my neighborhood, there'd probably be, I'd say 500 people live in my mobile home park, maybe, ish. So there would be 500 times 10, there'd be 50,000 if I got my math correct, 50,000 gigabytes worth of information just in my near surroundings. So when I think that I know everything, I come to realize, well, there's so much more information just outside my door than what I think that I know, right? So, in the anonymous programs, we have this thing called a group conscience. And this group conscience is how, source energy or God can speak through a group. And so the group conscience is just a whole bunch of 10 gigabytes all bringing their opinion to something, or bringing their understanding, their knowledge, they're just bringing of themselves, the collective. So rather than 10, say you've got 20 people in a business meeting, 20 times 10 is you've got 200 gigabytes, which is a heck of a lot more than just one to start making decisions by, right? And so you hope that within that 200 gigabytes, you have a little more clear directive to whatever source energy is. So, God is not a relationship to know. My 10 gigabytes can never know the infinite. If God is everything, God is all, God is omni, then how can I ever think that I would know the infinite? I mean, it's an impossible thought, right? I mean, there's no way I could ever know the infinite. So really, it's best if I just, it's truly best if I just reside in the, I'm not sure. I don't know. But we can find out. I mean, the greatest gift that I've been given through this whole sobriety thing, through the 12 steps, is just the realization that I could be wrong. I may be incorrect. I may not know for sure. So, using that as a starting point, perhaps it's best not to stand up with any sense of authority and say, this is how it is, right? But just say, well, this is how it has been shown to me. This is my understanding of it. And completely give space for there to be other, right? It's kind of like when we talk about different religions, right? This person's got this religion, that person's got this religion, right? And in the steps, a God of your own understanding, because it just gives permission, it gives space for everyone to have their own connection, right? So this quote, God is not a relationship to know. My 10 gigabytes will never know the infinite. The second part of that quote, God is a relationship to be. Now, for the egoic, self-centered person, well, that means I'm God, right? Wrong. Not at all. Not at all. Because if there is a I, me, my thought of, well, I'm God, then the point has been missed. To my understanding, what that quote means is, when I have surrendered my will, when I've absolutely let go of all of my thoughts, ideas, and perceptions of what God is, what God isn't, of what my beliefs are, what my beliefs aren't, when I just completely let all that stuff go, and I let all this, right, all this information just go. Suddenly my 10 gigabytes has just opened up to a greater reality, because there's not thought. No. I've sunk down more into here, into my intuitiveness. It's like the intuition doesn't usually come in full sentences. It comes in just it's a feeling. Do this, do that. So God is a relationship to be. So when I let go of myself, when I spiritually awaken, when I awaken to my true nature, and that generally means that I have done some sort of work on myself. There are some people who have spontaneously awoke, who spontaneously become enlightened, just driving down the side of the road. I'm not one of them, and I don't know of any who are. So, but being as though I don't know everything, right? I have to leave space for that. But for the majority of people that I know, we've all had to sort of put some work into this process of letting go, right? And this whole idea of surrender. If I am surrendering, break that sort of sentence up. It's like I am surrendering. That means there's still a me that's in the process of and doing something, right? So surrendering is still implies there's a me, there's all this self, there's all this that's having to just let it go. But in this thing called spiritual awakening or awakeness, there's just a stoppedness, which means that the surrendering has happened, has already occurred. And then one acts from this state of surrender. So God is not a relationship to know. My 10 gigabyte hard drive can never know the infinite, right? My thoughts, no. However, God can be a relationship to be. When I let go of me, when I let go of all of my thoughts, ideas, and beliefs, when I let go and surrender myself to the infinite, I become the infinite. In the absence of me, all there is God. In the absence of me, everything is exactly as it should be, as God would have it. So, God is not a relationship to know. God is a relationship to be. Hidden in that last phrase, it's just talking about the letting go of self. Once the self is completely let go, it's sort of godliness sort of arrives in this space. So, there you have it. The words of Nisargadatta. His book, again, is called I Am That. It is, to many, it is a sort of a handbook to the sort of spiritual Bible in different sorts, as the AA Big Book is the Bible for many others getting sober and whatnot. It's just that particular book has got so much. It's like the PhD of waking up. So.